Good morning, everybody, and welcome to part 3 in our epic day here at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. If you're joining us for the first time, which so many of you are, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And you're catching us in a very exciting day. Now, every February since our inception back in 2014, we have spent the entire month solely celebrating and showcasing the most amazing women in science and exploration on planet Earth. We've got 50 broadcasts this month alone. You can check out everything that we do on our YouTube channel. There's honestly endless things to explore and discover. But today, particularly February 11th, is the International Day for Women and Girls in Science, or STEM. So you can check that out at the UN, UNESCO, all sorts of great places to check that out, and all sorts of celebrations happening around the world. But what we wanted to do was partner with our friends at the World Wildlife Fund. So all year, we have featured their incredible scientists and explorers in a bevy of broadcasts. But today, we've outdone ourselves in partnership with them. We've got a 6-part series on the go. This is part 3. We wrapped up with helping nature and people from space with Mabel to start the day. We just wrapped up with Nina talking about AI and mangroves, and we are keeping the train going with Emily. Now, Emily, like me, is someone who grew up loving maps and loving checking out all sorts of cool things. Now, you can use that power to go on epic vacations, or you can use it to become a really awesome data scientist for the World Wildlife Fund and their Global Science Team. And if there's a cooler job on planet Earth than World Wildlife Fund scientists for like their global efforts in saving species and using maps to do that, I don't know what it is. So I encourage you to check out our whole series. Lots on the go there. That YouTube channel has everything that we've done. But without further ado, I'm going to zip it and turn you over to Emily to blow your mind with all the cool stuff she gets up to with maps. So Emily, welcome to the broadcast. So nice to have you here. And thank you so much for joining for our International Day for Women and Girls in STEM.
Thank you so much, Jesse. I'm really excited to be here. Hi, everyone.
Hi, so we've got 865 kids for you, which is like by far the biggest in our series today, because people like maps as much as you and I do. So I'm going to zip it. You got a beautiful presentation for us, and take us away.
All right, thank you so much. So my presentation today, we're going to be talking about maps, where in the world. So how maps help protect our planet. But before we get into it, I just wanted to introduce myself really quickly, give you some fun facts. So like Jesse mentioned, I work at World Wildlife Fund, and I'm a data analyst and engineer. So basically, that's a fancy way of just saying I work with data and maps. So where I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. Currently, I live in Alexandria, Virginia. So shout out to all the classrooms in Ohio and Virginia. My favorite subject in school was math. And when I was in school, I wanted to be a marine biologist. So this is a picture of me. I didn't become a marine biologist, but I did become a scuba diver. So this is a picture of me scuba diving with a really cool reef shark in the background. My favorite animal is the elephant. And I'll talk a little bit more about elephants today. And this is my favorite emoji, the crying laughing, because I love to laugh. So let's get into it. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story, how I got interested in maps, and how important maps are for protecting our planet and its wildlife and its people. So let's start with the basics. What is a map? A map is a symbolic representation. So when we make maps, we use symbols, we use colors, we use shapes, and they represent characteristics of a place. And they're usually drawn on a flat surface, so like a piece of paper or a screen. So we see maps every day, all the time, in so many different ways. So you might see maps like this when you turn on the news or look at your Weather Channel app to see what the weather's going to be like today. You might see maps related to sports. So if anyone out there watched the Super Bowl this weekend, here's an example of a map of where people are and which teams they're rooting for. And of course, one of the most common ones, we use maps to give us directions, figure out where we need to go. So this is showing how do I get from the United States Capitol building to WWF headquarters in Washington, D.C. And maps can also help us navigate other worlds, not just ours. So I got a bunch of examples here about games or stories or books that you might recognize. So this top one is of Mario Kart. We've got a little map here showing where the player is in relation to the course and the other cars. We've got Lord of the Rings map here. We've got Minecraft. How do you know where you are? in relation to the rest of the environment, we've got Fortnite maps, we've got Pokemon Go. So maps are everywhere and they help us know where we are in relation to the world around us. So the people who make maps, like me, we are called cartographers. And cartographers is anyone who creates maps in their job. And cartographers are everywhere. There are so many different types of jobs and fields where using maps are important to our jobs. So I wanted to just showcase a few examples here. One example is city planners. City planners use maps to plan where to build houses or offices or create parks and green spaces in cities. And another example is transportation. So, the people who keep our subways and our buses and our airports running safely, they use maps to, manage those systems and all of those modes of transportation. And not to mention, people use maps to use the subway and to figure out where they want to go. Some other examples are agriculture. So farmers use maps like this one to help understand what's going on in their fields, help produce healthy crops for food, and plan where to apply water and fertilizer to help their plants. Healthcare is another big area where you might see maps. So you might recognize this one from the COVID pandemic. So doctors and nurses and hospital workers, they use maps to look at where outbreaks are happening and to help prevent disease from spreading further. And then finally, we've got an example from government, lawmakers. So lawmakers use maps like this that are showing air pollution to understand, how clean water and clean water are being threatened and to make rules about industries and cars and all that stuff to make sure that our water and our air is clean. And environmental scientists like me use maps to understand nature. So here's a map of tree cover globally. So this helps me understand where are all the forests worldwide so we can help protect them. So now that you've seen lots of different examples of maps and how they're used, I want to tell you a little bit about my journey with maps and how I ended up working here at World Wildlife Fund. So when I was in school, like your age, I really liked math and science. And when I went to college at Ohio State, my goal was to go to medical school. So I worked in a neuroscience lab where we did lots of experiments with rats. And we used rats as a model to understand the human brain. And so when I was a kid, I always loved animals. But, when I was working in this lab, I decided I don't really want to study animals in this way. So, I love elephants and cheetahs. I got my Beanie Babies here, keeping me company at my desk. And so when I was a kid, I had a dream of going to Africa to see them in real life. So in college, I decided to try something completely different. I signed up for conservation volunteering over a couple of summers through this group called Operation Wallacea. And so I got to travel to some really cool places. This picture is when I went to Kruger National Park in South Africa. And then the following summer, I went to the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. And on these trips, I really loved learning about these really interesting places, the wildlife that live there. I learned about lots of different ways that scientists can try to understand them better. And so that includes things like measuring trees or measuring the grasslands that you see here, or listening for birds and identifying which species we hear, or catching and identifying insects or bats. And so those trips really got me interested in conservation. So I decided I didn't want to go to medical school, and I decided I wanted to go to Duke and study environmental science. So that's where I learned a lot about mapping and GIS. So GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems. And it's basically just a fancy way of saying making maps using computer software. And so for my master's project at Duke, I studied forest elephants. And over the summer, I went to Gabon, which is in West Africa. This is a picture of me with our field team there. And I went to a reserve or a park there to see what I could learn about forest elephants. So in this reserve, what was called Wonga Presidential Reserve, the managers there had started a program where they put GPS collars on some of the forest elephants. So you can see this is the collar that the elephant is wearing, and these track their location. So when I was there, we would wake up every morning, we would use a satellite phone to get the latest location of the elephant that we were following. And we would hike a few miles behind the elephant to see where they were going and what they were eating. And to do that, we had to dig through their poop, which was very fun, sometimes gross, but mostly fun. And this is my colleague, Amelia. She was collecting genetic samples using the elephant dung. And this was so we could understand how all the elephants were related to each other. So they tend to hang out in groups with their moms and their siblings and their cousins. So I made a lot of maps like these of the elephants' tracks across the parks. And then let's see, go to the next slide. I also made some maps like this. On the left, this is called a heat map. So the darker red and yellow colors, that shows where the elephants were hanging out most of the time. So usually their favorite places to hang out had lots of good food, like fruiting trees, or sometimes, unfortunately, they would go into the villages where people live and were growing crops, and the elephants really like to eat the crops. So maps like this can help conservationists and park rangers work with people who live nearby to these wildlife to understand, when and where the elephants are going to be, and try to come up with ideas about, how to deter the elephants from coming into the crop fields. So in some areas, bees really help with this. So elephants don't really like the buzzing bees around them or stinging them. So in some places, people have started harvesting honey and starting apiaries, and that also, deters the elephants from coming near, but also they get honey to consume, to eat, or to sell. So after graduating, I worked at the Chesapeake Conservancy, which is based in Maryland. And there I used maps like these to look at land cover on the left here, which is basically just what is on the land. Is it fields, buildings, grass, trees, water, etc.? And we also use maps like this on the right to look at water flow. So these types of maps can help us understand how to reduce or decrease the pollution that's getting into the streams and the rivers that eventually all flow to the Chesapeake Bay. And then I also learned how to fly a drone when I worked at the Conservancy. And we would collect footage like this. So this is me in the shade here controlling the drone. And we're flying over this beautiful stream and restoration project in Pennsylvania. And you can see the trees. I'll play it one more time. You can see some of the trees growing in here along the stream. And this is called a buffer. So those trees and their roots help trap pollution before it gets to the water. So this looks really healthy, and this type of buffer helps keep the streams healthy for fish, for livestock, for people. And drones can also help us collect really cool data, like what you see here. This is called LiDAR data. And these types of images and maps help scientists see the forest from above and help us understand the changes that are happening in the forest. So For example, in this picture, you can see this back area of trees. It looks like they have lost their leaves. So here, this map or image can try to help us understand what's going on. Maybe the trees are sick, and see if we can do something to help them get healthy again. So that brings me to my current job, working at World Wildlife Fund on the Global Science Team. And one of the ways I use maps is to help tell important stories for global conservation. So for example, this map shows the Amazon rainforest region. It's one of the most biodiverse places in the world. It's home to wildlife like jaguars and tapirs and river dolphins, lots of other wildlife. And so this map shows where people have cleared the forest in red, mostly for farming in these areas. It also shows where the forest is protected in the dark green areas, and where indigenous people already live and take really good care of the land in light green. So maps like this can help us save important places like the Amazon so that the forest can benefit wildlife and people for generations into the future. So I wanted to show some other examples of how my WWF colleagues use maps in conservation. So one big area is protected areas, or places like national or state parks that are set aside to preserve nature. And so this is a photo of some park rangers in Vietnam. They're using a map to plan their patrol. So they're going to go out into the forest and make sure that the park is truly protected. Here's another example of a group of people planning a trip in Myanmar using a map to plan. And this bottom right picture is a map of Namibia and its communal conservancies. So understanding where lands are already protected and who are the people who are protecting the land is really important for conservation. Also, mapping wildlife species, similar to what I talked about with elephants. Here's a picture of a green turtle, and it's returning to the ocean after a satellite tag has been attached to it, right here. And so these satellite tags help us map the turtle's movements. And if we see where the turtles are moving in relation to marine protected areas, maps like these can help conservationists make sure that the turtles have enough safe places to eat, enough places to safely nest on the beaches, etc. And maps are super helpful when conservationists are out in the field. So this is a photo of WWF's wildlife biologists. They are planning a nighttime survey for this little guy here, a black-footed ferret, which is an endangered species in Montana. And another example, these couple pictures are from Brazil. So going back to drones, this is an example of a WWF staff who's teaching a group of firefighters in Brazil. And they're teaching them how to use the drone to fly to get a better view of the land and to help them better prevent and fight wildfires. And then finally, maps are really useful when talking to people. So when people can come together around a table, talk to each other about what they're seeing on the map and what we're seeing in our world. So this is a photo of WWF Peru staff, and they're talking with a community leader about illegal mining happening in their area, how it affects his life, his people, his community. And they're using a map here on the right to make plans to restore some of this area to natural forest. So I hope this gave you some inspiration, some ideas of how maps can help us all protect our planet. I can't wait to see what you all do with maps. I want to encourage you to look out for maps in your life. Play with maps, whether it's geocaching or Pokemon Go or board games, Ticket to Ride, or learn to fly a mini drone. Of course, all these things, please ask your parents first for permission, but have fun, play with maps. I also want to say, please just keep an eye out for opportunities to learn and always try new things. So just some key words here to look out for. Maps, geography, which is the study of places, GIS, which we talked about, geographic information systems, cartography, which is making maps, and coding. Quick plug for coding. Is a great skill to learn for lots of fields, not just conservation, not just mapping, and it's a skill that I use a lot in my day-to-day work. And then finally, just lots of great resources for teachers and parents out there to think about maps, teach your kids. Please check out National Geographic, PBS, USGS. I put some links in there. Hopefully they're helpful. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for your attention, and have fun with maps.
Thank you so much, Emily, for all that great detail and the extremely deep cut of Ticket to Ride, which is one of my favorite board games that I got for Christmas. So thank you for that. But that's never been referenced in history of exploring by the seat of your pants. So that rocks. Emily, we've already got a bunch of questions in the chat. YouTubers, please keep sharing them there. Live classes. I'm coming to you all in just a minute. But 4B, our class in Charleston, South Carolina, where I kind of wish I was, because I had to clean 3 feet off of snow off the roof the other day. They shared, or an easy or very hard one, what is the most rewarding part of your job? No pressure, Emily.
Oh, that's a great question. I think the most rewarding part of my job is getting to work with people all over the world and just continuing to learn about amazing places, the wildlife that live there, next to the people that live there. And yeah, just continuing to learn and learn about different cultures and bringing some of those ideas from all around the world to my community and my home.
What a great
to figure out how we coexist with wildlife.
Oh, nice. Thank you for that great answer, Emily. That's awesome. All right. Caesar is joining in Nicaragua, and Caesar's been here for every one of the programs all day long. So Caesar's like the biggest WWF fan of all time. He wants to know what the smallest map you've done. So when I think of maps, I think of like a world map, or I think of like a planetary map, or even like a globe behind me here. Is there something where you're doing this on a really, really small scale? And what would be the context of something like that?
That's a good question. I would say a lot of my work, since I'm on the global science team, we do make a lot of those like global level maps. On the small scale, or local scale, I should say, I want to bring up a project that probably Dina talked about if you were here for her stream, but the Manglaria project, where we're looking at how we use AI and data to help restore or protect mangroves in Mexico. So I think some of the local maps that I made for that project are, quite local to like the Yucatan Peninsula, for example, where we actually got to visit some of those field sites and install sensors. So things like camera traps, where we're trying to see what kind of wildlife live in the mangroves there. And so I made some maps where we have points, representing the points where we're monitoring in the mangroves.
Very, very cool. I really do encourage our classes. If you get the chance, Dina's was fantastic. It's on our YouTube channel, so you can check that program out if you want to see about mangroves AI. Some really, really cool stuff on the go there. KaiPod Learning, I'm going to head to you guys for our first live question. Emily, Elijah, Miss Bakir students, we're coming to you all, I promise, multiple times. But KaiPod crew, if you guys want to kick us off with a question, come on up and go for it. Hey, Dover.
Hello, can you hear us okay?
Yeah, perfectly.
Awesome. One of our students was wondering if you, Emily, have done any work with ocean mapping before. Ooh. And if you have, how is this process similar to the mapping you do now with WWF, and how does it differ?
Very cool.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I haven't done too much just because I'm not an expert in the oceans or for the wildlife that live in the oceans, but WWF has an oceans team. So that team makes a lot of maps related to the ocean. I made a couple maybe that relate to like the economic zones along coasts. But there's a lot of really cool mapping in the oceans. One cool topic is on like deep sea exploration and mining and mapping the seafloor. Super cool work there. But yeah, of course, it's quite different. The Mabel this morning talked about satellite imagery and sensing the Earth's surface, and a lot of the techniques there, don't work. They don't penetrate the water, so we have to use completely different mapping techniques for underwater or mapping, what's in the ocean. And of course, it's really difficult to track marine wildlife too, because some of them dive super deep. We're just scratching the surface of understanding how animals move through the ocean, and it's really, really amazing stuff.
We have scientists that are like blue whale experts that come on, and they've seen like 5 in their whole lives. Like, I mean, they're the biggest animal ever to exist, way bigger than any dinosaur, and we barely have any idea what they do, where they are at any given time. For people that are keen on deep sea exploration and mapping, we feature a lot of the ships that do that. So the Nautilus, the Falcor, the Atlantis. It's like the golden age of ships going out and doing maps of the seafloor. So it's a really, really exciting time if you're keen on that. That's a very neat question. Thanks, guys. Emily, Elijah, our schooler at home, if you guys want to unmute your mic and come on in, you've got a great question in the chat, but more fun to have you on. So come on in and take us away. Hey, Homeschool Academy.
Hi. We'd like to know what's the most dangerous moment in your job.
Ooh, nice.
That's a good question. So I will preface this by saying safety is always the top priority for any field expedition, for conservationists or scientists who are trying to learn about the environment or animals. I would say the most dangerous or close encounter I had was probably in graduate school when I was in Gabon following forest elephants. And we made a very concerted effort. We were not trying to get close to the elephants. We were trying to follow a safe distance behind, because we were really just interested in, where they were moving. Was it forest? Was it grassland? And what they were eating. So we didn't really need to see the elephants to get that information. So that was an important safety consideration. But we did run into some elephants, and might not have been the ones that had the collars on them.
Nope.
And so that was a little scary, because the elephants, their vision, they actually see better at night. And so they're more comfortable at night. And during the day, their vision is not as good. So when we were out following the elephants, they're a little bit more weary, and they go into the forest at night for that sort of cover and protection. So there were a couple moments in that work where, we could hear things moving in the forest, but it's pretty dense. And so you don't really know, it sounds like something big. Maybe it's an elephant, maybe it's a forest buffalo. So we had some close encounters there, but it was an adventure.
That is not an uncommon story for people in Africa in any way, shape, or form, or Asia for that matter. Elephants are not an animal you want to run into unprepared, and certainly to hear them in a forest around you is a bit of a sketchy situation. So that all was well. Great question, guys. On a similar note, Miss A's class joining us in Toronto, my hometown, they want to know if there's a hardest or most challenging part of your job. So this doesn't need to be danger. This can be something that's just an everyday challenge that you have to sort of work through, but anything you want to share.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest challenge when it comes to mapping is that, you could have two people who are mapping basically the same thing, like say forests, for example. And maybe they're trying to estimate, okay, how many hectares of forest are intact in a specific country or area. And those two people could be mapping the same thing, but their maps could be different. And the numbers of hectares of forest that they generate could be different. And it's all because of the data that underlies the map. So one of the big challenges for mapping is just making sure we understand the data that goes into the map, and making sure that the data is accurate, that it comes from a reliable source, and that we're able to communicate. Like all data, all maps are, a representation of the real world. It's not going to be perfect ever. So we just have to be able to communicate to the readers of the map, what it means and what are the different considerations that you have to keep in mind when reading a map.
I've worked at attractions before back when I was in Toronto, and they went through like 10 different maps of guiding people through the space. And it was the same space, but radically different interpretations and how people experienced it and lived it and got around with that map was wildly different. I honestly, I encourage our students, make maps of your own, whether that's your classroom, your neighborhood, your neck of the woods, and they're going to be quite different from each other. And it sort of speaks to the craft of cartography and everything Emily was talking about at the beginning. So very, very cool question, guys. Speaking of some of the work that you do, you highlighted a lot of ways that people can learn more about maps, but on the data side, the coding side, is there anything that you'd recommend students, particularly girls, to get into that might be keen to learn more?
That's a good question. Well, I actually really like the book called Python for Kids. Python is a coding language, and it's one that I use a lot in my job. That's one that I would recommend, and it's sort of a fun way to get started. If there's any sort of school programs that you can find, STEM programs that introduce coding or introduce concepts related to coding, go for it. It's really fun. It's it's sort of like solving a puzzle if you like jigsaw puzzles or anything like that. I would really encourage that.
I had a pet snake as a boy, and I think I had a Python for Kids book that was just very different when I was learning how to handle it. But there you go, guys. And we talked about a few of these in our chat earlier. Girls Who Code is just a spectacular resource and a spectacular training module. Like when Emily and I were kids, coding programs like that did not exist, and the world is your oyster now. So there's so much to explore out there. So just get out there and check it out. We got a cool question. I love when we get this question, so no pressure at all. So our 4B class wanted to know, what's the primary revenue streams for WWF? How do you pay for all this amazing work that you do around the world?
That's a good question. So we have a lot of different types of revenue streams. One big one is private donors. So individual donors, people who are able to donate even, pretty small amounts of money, either each month or one time. So that's a major source, individual donors. We have revenue coming from foundations that are interested in supporting science or nature conservation. We also have government funding, working with governments all over the world since we're an international organization. So it's a pretty wide range.
Yeah, I've just actually on the YouTube channel, I've put the World Wildlife Fund financials because one thing that's really nice about charities in Canada and the United States anyway, is they have to disclose where they get their money. They have to highlight where people are giving them money from. And it's just a really great way to be transparent and highlight that great work that they're doing. So I encourage you to check that out. It's honestly, one of the nice things about WWF is that you do so much for so little in the scheme of things. Like there's been no organization that has done more for conservation on this planet than WWF over its decades of existence. And it's really incredible to see the amount of people and expertise they brought to that with the funding they've received over those years. So cool question, guys. I love that we're getting these from middle schoolers and junior schoolers now. It's awesome. Very, very cool.
Yeah, I love that.
Emily, we're going to head back to our KaiPod learning crew. If you guys have a second one for us in Dover, come on in and take us away. Hey, guys.
Do you want me to say it? Okay.
Take your time. No hurry.
Maybe we here at KaiPod do a lot of geocaching.
Yes.
Nice.
Which I think we're pretty enthusiastic about. But we're also, one question I was wondering, how can citizens, students, adults help provide data that might be useful? Like, is there any sort of global project for data that would be helpful with mapping wildlife and whatnot that you can think of that we could interact with?
Yes, that's a great question. So there are a lot out there of options in terms of community science and contributing to data sets when it comes to wildlife. One of the biggest ones is called iNaturalist. And that's a really good one to get involved with. It's easy to start. It's an easy app you can use, and you can, create records of all kinds of different species. And that one is a huge, huge global data set. And I have used it in my work sometimes too for mapping. So that would be a great start.
It is a great start. Sorry, I'm frantically pulling up other banners for folks. So iNaturalist we've used for years. It's amazing. It's the best tool ever. If you want to find out what lives near you, or like check Gabon and see where Emily was and see what lives there, you can do that for creatures all over this planet. It's such a cool tool. And I put the Seek app up there because it's like the Pokemon Go style spinoff for kids. So if you want to like earn badges for the pictures you take of creatures, it links into the iNaturalist, sort of umbrella, and is spectacular. And the backyard bird count we talked about earlier today, which is happening in like 3 days, the backyard bird count begins. So go take pictures of birds, look this up, submit your pictures, and you'll help real scientists like Emily in the work that they do. So really cool question, guys. All right, Emily, Elijah, I'm going to head to you guys if you've got another question for us, and then we'll take one more from you two before we wrap up, because time flies when you're having fun in these broadcasts. So Homeschool Academy, come on back in. Hey.
Hi.
Hi. Do you have any other questions for Emily?
Have you ever encountered a lion?
Ooh, we've had elephants. How about lions?
Yes, I have. Let's see. When I was in South Africa, we would kind of like go on these game drives for the conservation volunteering trips that I talked about. And I saw actually 2 lions. Here's my lion, Beanie Baby. I saw 2 male lions, which is kind of rare because sometimes they hang out by themselves. But we saw 2 young male lions, and they were feasting on a kill that they had just made. And it was really cool.
It's quite amazing how many of the scientists and explorers that we bring on highlight South Africa in particular. Just seems to be a really, really special place in the world. If you ever get the chance to go to any game parks in East or South Africa, they're some of the most special places on the planet. And so
Yes.
as a final question for you, Emily, we've talked about elephants and lions. Is there a favorite place you've been? Like if we had to go and explore our own maps and go somewhere really, really cool, where would you recommend we go?
Oh gosh, I don't know. There's just so many cool places in the world I couldn't pick.
Where would you like to go? Where's a place that you haven't been that you'd like to go? New map unfurled.
Let's see. So since I'm a scuba diver, I would say one place I really want to go is the Maldives, which is a group of islands, and there's some amazing marine wildlife, mammals, sharks there. So I would like to go there.
We've actually regularly featured a crew that goes out and does diving with tiger sharks in the Maldives. So if you ever want a connection, just hook us up and we'll chat about it. But I want to stress on the scuba diving note, we didn't get to harp on this. Kids, so many of you fit this bill. At 8 years old, you can start on the path to being a scuba diver with something called Paddy Bubble Maker, which means that you can go and explore 70% of the world that you otherwise do not have access to when you have that power. It's like magic. I have the lowest level certification as a scuba diver, and it's some of the coolest things I've ever done. So if you want to be like Emily and be super, super cool, go learn scuba diving. Even if you're in like Saskatchewan or Iowa and you're nowhere near an ocean, it doesn't matter. You can go learn, and it changes your life forever. So I can't encourage that enough.
Yep.
Kids, there's so much to cover. Honestly, we've covered iNaturalist, we've covered Backyard Bird Count, worldwildlife.org and their amazing channel, the International Day for Women in Science, and of course our whole epic series with the World Wildlife Fund, which you can check out on our YouTube channel. Emily, before we bring in all our kids and say a big thank you and farewell, and please do stick around after that's done, is there any final message you want to leave our kids with today about maps, about the work you do, or anything to say goodbye?
I'll just reiterate, play, explore with maps. The possibilities are endless. So just get out there and try new things, see what you like. And yeah.
No better message than that. I've got my huge world map like right there and my globes in the other room. So it's very fun to explore maps. We can spend endless hours if you're like Emily or I. So thank you all so much, students, for joining us today. I'm going to bring in Emily, Elijah, and our KaiPod Learning crew, our live groups, to say big thank you and farewell. YouTubers, if you want to scream and yell at home and annoy the principal, please do feel free to do that. And so without further ado, welcome in, everyone. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank
Bye for now, guys. We'll see
you.
you all